In the 90s, television was starting to reach its prime. It became a primary source of short-form entertainment that a person could use simply to turn their brains off, even for a couple of hours after a hard work day. Today, TV is dominated by something that's not even TV, streaming services. Streaming services seem to be more like a bunch of little movies nowadays than a simple, mindless show where you can turn on one random episode and not miss a beat. Not too long ago, however, this was not the majority. Consider the popularity of long-running sitcoms such as The Simpsons or Friends, as I will mention again soon. These series are not necessarily intended to binge from start to finish, rather tune in a couple times a month and see what antics these characters are up to this week. I would consider the 90s to be the golden age of sitcoms. While I wouldn't consider myself a huge fan of Friends or The Simpsons, you can't deny that the pop culture impact of these shows was, and still is, astronomical. I mean, The Simpsons is still airing, and Friends merchandise is everywhere you turn, despite the show ending almost 20 years ago. But we need to consider the social climate of the 90s, which hailed the start of many iconic sitcoms such as Friends and That 70s Show. The 90s were a time of social reform. While not quite as progressive as we are today, people were advocating for better representation and more opportunities to show pride in one's identity. This included not only different races and cultures, but also sexuality, particularly gay men. This advocacy brought a lot of diverse characters onto television screens, with different skin colors and cultural backgrounds. While not nearly as diverse as TV shows are today, this still meant a lot to the general public who had been begging for this for years. The gay word still proved an issue for television studios. The AIDS crisis didn't end until the early 1990s, so people still held many problematic beliefs and discomfort with accepting gay men. Most sitcoms who featured gay characters typically limited it to one episode, a running gag, or simply implied the gayness, and were too afraid to say the big bad G word. They were quick to state that there wouldn't be anything wrong with a character being gay, but they just couldn't understand why someone would be. An example of this is in Friends. People seem to forget the homophobia evident in Friends when they go on their millionth rant of the day on why Friends is the most iconic and best sitcom ever created. Take a look at the one recurring canon gay couple on Friends. Carol and Susan are the only ones, and while a lesbian relationship shown on screen is definitely progressive for the time, let's think a little bit more critically about them. First of all, let's consider why they're the only canon recurring gay couple and why the show uses the word lesbian openly from the beginning, but the word gay is used hesitantly and much later in the show, before just being referred to as, quote, that. This is a prime example of what gender studies students like myself will recognize as the socially acceptable gay person. This term defines the appropriate representation of a gay person, one that is minimally offensive while also providing representation for the community. The problem arises when you take into account that the efforts to make a gay person socially acceptable result in stripping away many of the traits and experience that make a gay person relatable. Take Carol and Susan once more and consider their traits. They're mothers, one is an ex-wife of a main character, and they're lesbians. That's it. This stripped away everything that made them relatable, or anything that could have made them relatable. They're hardly there in the show, and the only perspective we see them from is that of Ross, who would of course have a biased view, seeing that his wife left him for a woman. This is a whole other issue to cover, but I rest my case. The socially acceptable gay person is subtle here, seeing that Susan and Carol are such minor characters that you hardly notice them to begin with. But there's another example of this phenomenon within the main cast that far fewer people are aware of. A bit of information that you can use to impress your friends is that Chandler Bing was initially meant to be gay. David Crane, one of the showrunners for Friends, is actually gay, and wished to have an LGBT character in the main cast. Originally, this was meant to be Chandler. However, seeing the political climate of the early 90s, this would not be an easy feat. Gay characters were rarely explicitly shown, let alone as part of a main cast. Their way around this was to have a full episode dedicated to Chandler's coworkers thinking he is gay, and Chandler wrestling with getting them to change their minds and convince them otherwise. Much of this episode is played for laughs because it would be funny if he was gay. However, showrunners have been credited for Chandler's strange back-and-forth identity, stating, "Write it gay but play it straight." This meant the script intended for queer coding, allowing Chandler to be that, but never explicitly say so. There was also that really weird SNL skit, but I digress. For fear of copying Matt Baum's video, I'll stop this one here, but he goes deeper into the straightening of Chandler Bing. If you want to check it out, the link is in the description as usual. While most sitcoms of the 90s were afraid of gay male representation, one show was not. That 70s show was iconic in many ways, leaving fans nostalgic for a time they never even lived in, including me. That 70s show was one of the first sitcoms to ever feature an openly gay character and used the word gay to describe him right off the bat. This character is, of course, Buddy Morgan, from the season 1 episode, Eric's Buddy. The episode follows main character Eric as he grows closer with his classmate Buddy, and the pair become inseparable. Buddy is Eric's dream best friend. Buddy is fun to hang out with, he has a cool car. I guess those are the only boxes you needed to fill in the 70s to have a friend. Either way, this friendship is intense and deep, leading the rest of the gang to feel abandoned by Eric as he never hangs out with them anymore. One night, when Eric and Buddy are sitting in Buddy's car, talking about Eric's relationship with Donna, Buddy does the unexpected and kisses Eric. I need you all to know how fucking revolutionary this was, for the time, okay? This was the first gay male kiss aired on television, beating Dawson's Creek by only 5 months, and holy moly guys, this was just awesome. Eric pulls away, but not after a second of hesitation, and freaks out, rightfully so. I mean, his best friend just kissed him full on the lips, and from the looks of things, Eric didn't seem to be bothered at first. His first words are, "You're gay?" And this is also revolutionary. They straight up used the G word and didn't skate around it. Anyway, the scene ends with Eric telling Buddy that he's not gay and doesn't like him that way. Later, he asks why Buddy likes him. Buddy has a simple answer. He guesses it's the same reasons Donna likes him. You're smart and sensitive and nice looking. This episode is partly played for laughs, but in this case, I think it's okay. It's okay to laugh because there's more than enough proper gay representation here. Earlier in the scene, right before Buddy kisses him, Eric states, "I feel like I'm playing a part that's not me." This is obviously supposed to be parallel to how someone may feel about being gay. Likely also the thing that led Buddy to assume Eric was gay too. We even get to hear why Buddy likes Eric and have it compared to a straight love interest, and not to show their differences but to show similarity. Buddy's character is handled extremely well for the time, and it's really a shame he didn't return for more episodes. Buddy's character was kicked off the show, and I don't mean the writers found a way to write him off. I mean, after this episode, Buddy is never mentioned a single other time, and all the characters kind of just forget about him. This can be written off as sitcom logic, but the truth lies in homophobia. After this episode aired, that 70s show faced mass scrutiny for such a heinous crime as showing a gay kiss on screen and supporting a gay character. That 70s show ratings dropped, and the writers had no choice but to abandon Buddy Morgan forever. But people didn't realize until later that this actually changed the plans for the show going forward. Now, I do want to clarify that there's little information to prove my coming statements, but there's huge fan support for the theory, and that has to come from somewhere, right? I just want to make sure you take it with a grain of salt, and to avoid me from being accused of spreading misinformation. It has been widely suggested by fans of that 70s show that the showrunners had intended for Buddy to be a recurring character, and even be a love interest for Eric. Yes, you heard that right. The showrunners intended Eric Forman to be bisexual and have an ongoing relationship with Buddy. Judging from the structure of the episode and the lack of criticism within the show for Buddy being gay, I certainly believe it. While the second half of the episode features Eric defending his masculinity after being mistaken for a gay man, this can easily be seen as the first episode of a several episode romance. We all know that many gay people often face a stage of denial before fully realizing their identity. And despite all this, Buddy still likes Eric. To each their own, but to me this definitely seems like the beginning of a long-running romance plotline that was intended to return for more episodes. If you want to learn more about this episode from another more critical perspective, I urge you to read Kristy Puchko's article linked in the description. This article argues that the episode is negative representation and is not aged well. And while I politely disagree, it is important to recognize and understand viewpoints opposite of our own. Today, we have much better LGBT representation in media, especially representation that is not explicitly stated, not just implied and then erased. However, we still have work to do. Netflix doesn't have a great track record for LGBT representation, but lately, they seem to be doing better, with LGBT storylines that run deep, in shows like Sex Education, The Umbrella Academy, and what seems to be Stranger Things? They've flip-flopped on that one a little bit lately, but I digress. I wonder if Friends and That 70s Show were written today, would we have gotten the representation we deserve? The 90s were a sensitive time for LGBT representation, and networks had to be careful what they said and showed, out of fear of mass disapproval like That 70s Show had received. Overall, I don't blame them for keeping it on the down low. What do you think? I encourage you to leave your thoughts in the comments and discuss politely. Any references I use are linked in the description as usual, and I hope you all enjoy this video. Stay safe and stay cool. Happy Pride Month. This is Peanut Putter signing off, and I will see you all next time.